Hi everyone, welcome to the Robert Show. Today on the Robert Show, we are diving into one of the most talked about shifts in enterprise tech right now. That is AI agents. Over the past 1 year or more, the conversation has moved from experiments to real deployment. Teams are no longer just testing AI; they are figuring out where it delivers value, how to scale it, and what it means for infrastructure, governance, and day-to-day work as well. To unpack this, I'm joined by this amazing group of three people right, who are working with a lot of enterprise customers, who've been working closely with the community, and have done so much for the community in the recent state of AI agents report as well, which was released by Databricks. So, first of all, welcome, Kunal. Not a new face to the Robert Show. We spoke about the state of data and AI report last year, and this time it's state of AI agents report. So I'm excited to chat about that. We also have Mason Force from Databricks and Chengyin joining us. It's your debut, so I'm excited to chat about various things as well. To start with, I'm pretty sure we'll be getting into intros and the other stuff, but just for our audience, I wanted to let them know that we'll be talking a lot about what companies are actually doing with AI today, what separates pilots from real impact, and where enterprise AI is heading next. So let's get into it. Why not start with a quick intro? Maybe Chengyin, would you like to quickly introduce yourself? Tell us more about what you do at Databricks.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. Yeah, I'm currently a manager on the AI forward deployed engineering team, and previously I was an AI engineer as well. So what my team does is that we help customers to build their projects, from zero to one, to from ideation to production.
Fantastic, amazing.
Hey, I'm a solutions architect, Mason Force, actually based out in Seattle, but I work mostly with financial services customers. So I've been with Databricks about 3 years now, and it's been a wild ride.
Fantastic. Regulated industries. I have a lot of questions. We are going to get into it. Kunal, tell us more about your role.
Oh, thank you so much, Ravi. Firstly, thank you so much for having us back, and very excited. So, for all your audience, I'm Kunal Marwah, Senior Solutions Architect, primarily in the retail and consumer goods space. I've had a data engineering, data science background, and I have been working at Databricks for almost 4 years now. So, very excited to talk to you all today.
Fantastic. Thanks everyone for joining today. I'm excited and I'm just going to jump right in. Over the last 12 months, agentic AI has been one of the biggest talking points within the tech space. We all have been hearing a lot about it. The State of AI Agent report, which was recently released by Databricks, shared interesting findings on the adoption trends of AI agents in enterprise environments. Can you talk, us about these data points and the broader trends that point to kind of curious to know about it, and I'm also going to pull the report for our audience to have a look at it and maybe also share a link so they can download and learn more about it. Kunal, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think as you mentioned, we spoke a couple of years ago, and, AI is a fast moving space, fast evolving. And,
Yep.
our company, as you know, Databricks, over the past, almost decade has sort of been on the cutting edge of that innovation from Spark into the Lakehouse paradigm. And we had the data intelligence platform. And so what we saw was as the AI space is evolving and more capabilities are being launched, we have tried to keep at pace with that and help our customers in sort of various segments in terms of what can they do with the just starting getting it up and running in terms of using AI in a playground or simple LLMs, into then a little bit more sophisticated use cases using their data within
Right.
Unity Catalog. And then finally, what we get here is like full state AI agents that are able to handle complex business problems. And the one thing I would just say, with this report and in Databricks in general, is because we have such a wide range of customers, almost 20,000 customers globally, what we are able to do is actually look at real usage and then see where some of those sort of applications are coming on, which, interest a lot of people.
Yeah, it looks like there are around more than 20,000 companies usage data that has been put into the report. So I'm kind of, obviously super curious to learn more about it in detail. But one of the common questions that I get is what are companies actually using AI for? So who would like to pick this one and tell us a little bit? Because all of you kind of work very closely with customers and engineering and the are working in AI. So would love to know a little bit about this as well.
Yeah, Arvid, I can take that one. So, working in financial service, I've had a lot of opportunities to see how my customers are using generative AI, but we wanted to take a broader stance when it comes to the report. So, we took a look at all the different projects that our customers are putting into production across the industry, and we've grouped them into different categories. And I think if you take a look at our results, you'll see that a lot of companies are getting started with similar use cases with generative AI. I think the trends here, and if you, yeah, let's see if we can pull up the categories there. Yeah, so you'll see here our top AI use case category here is market intelligence, and this makes sense, right? We see our companies are looking to automate the more tedious tasks. We're looking to take our existing employees and make them more productive. And market intelligence involves going out and pulling in a variety of different data, combing through this manually, and then applying it to see how we can make insights about our investment strategies. And it has been historically tedious. And it also applies across all of the industries we work with. And so I think it makes sense that we're seeing that as the top category. But I think what's really interesting, right, is we're seeing growth in other use case categories that are super industry specific. Like number 2, predictive maintenance. It's really industry specific, like for automation and like assembly lines. We're also seeing things in financial services and insurance, like claim processing. And I think these represent really some of the coolest opportunities I see.
Mm-hmm. This is pretty interesting for sure, Mason, and thanks for giving us more in detail. I'm kind of also curious to learn how companies ensure these small projects are successfully bridged into actual high impact strategic transformation. Maybe Chengyin, you can tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I love the way that you phrased the question. The idea that we should really think about how to go from a small project to a high impact strategic transformation. I think at some point in the report, it also mentions that in the data layer, AI agents really require infrastructure shift that only really happen like maybe once in every decade. So that really means that first we need to find commonalities among the different departments. Like how do we make sure that we can standardize on infrastructure? If there are similar use cases, how can we make sure that there are no duplicated efforts? And I think the second point is what maybe a lot of companies overlook is once we implement a version 1, how do we prepare for change management and like maintenance basically? Is there a cross-functional ownership that we can assign to like at a business level, but also from the AI and also engineering level as well? I think preparing for these 2 things, like finding commonalities and also making sure that's cross-functional ownership for change management will be really crucial to make sure that these small projects can eventually be converted into more impactful projects across the whole company.
Yeah, I love it. When it comes to smaller projects, what I feel is like the most of the enterprises kind of also feel more confident when they start small, and then when they have to scale, they already have like the proven examples that are kind of sitting, and it just becomes very interesting for the larger team to be, because they have that use case that they worked in. It just becomes interesting for them to scale in AI. I also have like one curious question, maybe Mason and Chengyin, for you is what's the clearest difference you see between teams that successfully put AI agents into production and teams that stay stuck in pilots? Because I still talk to a lot of enterprise leaders, and then they feel that okay, we kind of obviously started with a pilot, but we're still here. And then there are obviously enterprise leaders who have scaled massively, even like at least 12 months back when people were experimenting. These leaders, some leaders were like, we've already started putting this into production because we want to try and learn how it all comes together. So any thoughts around that? Maybe you can start.
Yeah, I can start us off. Yeah, I think in my role, I do a lot of scoping. So that means that I gather data requirements and also business requirements. A lot of times, we focus on the success criteria, like what makes a project successful, what makes a project go to production. But I think what we often don't talk about is what failures can we accept. So I think that is something that we need to be comfortable with before even start an AI agent project. Like if a project were to be stuck in pilot, what are the failure causes? Is it because that we're unable to accept the cost of being wrong, Or is it because we haven't really thought about integration with the existing infrastructure? I think really just making sure that we are clear about, yes, there can be successes that we can aspire to, but AI ultimately is still not completely correct all the time. So what are the rooms of failure can we accept as well?
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, and I'll speak, from a financial services and a regulated perspective. It really all comes down to evaluation and governance, right? And we saw this in the report too. So what we did is we looked and we saw our customers who were more successful with Gen AI products. Well, we asked, well, what are they doing differently compared to their peers? And I suspected it was these two things, but even still, it was pretty dramatic. We actually
Right.
found that the customers who are using the evaluation tool set on the platform right now have nearly 6 times more generative AI projects in production. Like, it's
Yeah.
significant. And it's even more dramatic for governance. So similarly, the customers that are using the governance tool sets have 12 times more generative AI projects in production. And I think this makes sense for financial services, right? Nobody is going to be confident putting something into production unless we have that layer of governance, unless we're putting guardrails on top and we're sure that we have a unified security throughout the pipeline. And then, of course, being able to say, how does this version of the model compare to a previous version? I need some kind of an objective measurement to show that we've improved. And being able to do that objectively with like a judge-based approach on our platform is really helpful to move things into the production stage.
Yeah, I love it. These are fantastic insights. Kunal, I have a question for you. 78% of the companies use multiple LLM model families. What's the rationale for multi LLM strategies, and how should teams operationalize it without complexity exploding? Because that is also one big problem when we kind of obviously scale and the operations kind of take place. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. One of the things, the path to, when you look at path to production, the as much as we can minimize the moving parts in terms of the whole ML ops structure, the easier a project has a likelihood to succeed. And I think that's kind of what our platform has looked at. One of the things, to your point, in terms of LLMs is, we've had a foundation model servings, like where we've been able to take all open source models, may it be ChatGPT, some of the Gemini models, Claude, Llamas. So we have all on the platform. And so as companies are defining a business problem and creating an agent, a lot of times you'll realize is that one problem requires 5 different agents to be
Right.
created, and those 5 different agents don't always require the heavy LLM or the large LLMs to be used. Some of them could be as much as just analyzing a sentiment of a customer review or trying to look at a supply chain inventory. And so you're looking at different sizes of models. And so rather than sort of doing one shoe fits all, we give you the options of not only just using the models that are on your platform, but you're like, hey, I also need external models that I very much love, my proprietary models. We also allow you to bring that with something known as an AI gateway. And so with the combination of that, you are now in a model-rich environment with strict governance controls and data quality. And so that is like, so you kind of all have the raw ingredients to make a really nice AI recipe.
Nice. That is actually super helpful. Kunal Mason, I have like one question, because I was going through the report, and one thing that I have been reading and thinking about a lot is the report shows AI agents now create 80% of the databases, up from 0.1% to 2 years ago, I guess. What does that tell you about how infrastructure work is changing? But also what leaders should anticipate next is something I'm very curious about, and I'm pretty sure those who are watching us would also love to know a little bit about it. So Kunal, would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, so one of the things that your audience and a lot of people would know, that Databricks acquired Neon a couple of years ago, I think almost 12 months ago. And that was our first foray into, the transactional databases. And
Right.
those are really important, because what is happening is, as AI agents are sort of looking at data, interfacing with data. One
Right.
example is, the feature stores and the vector stores for RAG applications. You need a quick turnaround in terms of storing information and like embedding models and sort of then serving it out to external services. And so with that, you need is a quick sort of a data transactional storage layer. And that is what has sort of led to a lot of like, as you're seeing almost like 90% increase in AI agents because of like the agentic, requirements of some of these projects and the need for high data throughput.
Yeah, pretty interesting. Mason, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a great call out. And we've seen that the tool based approach is really satisfying a need that a lot of people have come to us with, which is just the idea that these foundation models are great for these really general use cases. But like I was saying earlier, the real value is the data that I bring in that's specific to my industry. And so if we can provide agents with access to tools, it's going to give much higher quality responses, which is something that's super important, again, if we're considering moving something into production.
That is actually very important for sure when you kind of thinking from going from pilot to production, but also if you're kind of working already. One question that I have for you, Chengyin, was around the early signals, because that is something which is very important. What are the best early signals that an internal app or use cases is worth investing in? Because we spoke a little bit about trying stuff and then learning as you go as well. But what about the early signs? What do you think?
Yeah, one of the slides you flashed earlier on, had a headline saying something about AI can remove routine tasks. I think that's absolutely one of the type of categories of use cases that we can target. Like, how can we look for this cognitively expensive tasks that maybe involve more lower judgment level? But I think at a maybe zooming out to a broader perspective, we need to also consider like who are we building for and how many people are we building for? Like, yes, can I do this? The answer usually is yes, but should we build this for just one person, two person? Or maybe only when it gets up to a certain size that it justifies, the cost of, making such an investment in building an AI agent. So I think, again, it comes back to some type of cost benefit analysis. But I think maybe the final point over here is that usually the best early signal kind of in terms of use cases that we want to actually put in money and effort to invest in is to think about the horizontal convergence across the different departments in terms of the use case relevance. Like, is there an organic pull from different directions that will be benefit from this particular use case? Or again, like, is this use case a much more local one? Like, to quote your question earlier, a much smaller project, or is something that can solve a more structural problem? So I think judging from both the use case size, like the audience size, and also really just like the impact in terms of like cross-functional departments or convergence, and that will be really valuable.
Yeah, this is pretty interesting, and thanks for sharing these insights. So I have one curious question for the group here, and this is more on the lines where I'm kind of thinking about 2026 itself. I'm not gonna even ask about the next 2 to 3 years, because we are in the space where things kind of evolve very quickly. Even months, things kind of evolve a lot. But in your opinion, how do you think enterprise AI strategies and use cases will continue to mature and evolve in 2026 and beyond? Where do you think companies will focus next? Because you all work very closely with different industries, different enterprises. So curious to learn a little bit about that. Maybe Kunal, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say maybe the era of agentic apps. I mean, like apps are the new slides, as we like to say here. And I think having more AI within sort of custom-based apps, and then I think within those apps and agents, what I would love to see, I think, and we're getting towards that, is more reason-based analysis. Right now a lot of things are causal. It's like, oh, I put in something and there's a cause for like, but to ask why. And I think sort of we are getting into that zone with reinforcement learning where models are getting smarter and smarter. So I think that is sort of the hope for the future.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Mazik, what do you think?
I think it's interesting in terms of how organizations think of their internal products. Like, for example, in the past, we used to see that the finance team might maintain, we'd call it like a gold set of tables that they use for the rest of the organization. But now, as we move into the agentic approach, Now their end product may be an actual agent that they make available to different teams, whether that agent is being used, like Kunal mentioned, in an application, or it's being exposed externally. So that's really the new type of presentation layer.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. Chengyin?
Yeah, this is such a meta question. I think a trend that I've observed in my conversations with customers is that it has shifted from asking the question of can AI do this to what do we get for what we spent? So I think again, like consumers are getting more conscious about where they're investing their time, their effort, their resources, and going from like designing AI for work, we're also currently, I think, approaching a direction where we're thinking about how do we redesign work around AI, like for all of us, like not just for technical developers, but also for non-technical users as well. Like for example, like how do we even use AI in, I don't know, education tech, or in typical university settings, or in a much more or less traditional AI settings. So I think there's also a lot of effort or trends thinking about that, and also thinking about, I can go back to one of the question, like how do we sort of standardize on so many different tools. And I think the build versus buy conversation maybe is also shifting, like rather than building everything yourself, can we standardize on one thing that makes everybody's life simpler in terms of change management and maintenance? So I think those are some things I've observed currently in my customer conversations.
Yeah, definitely. And all this resonates very well with me as well, because as we are kind of, obviously this is like the start of 2026, but the predictions, we kind of, always do these 2026 predictions. And what I have been kind of hearing from the enterprises as well is more in the agentic space, apps kind of, obviously standing out a lot in the conversations that we are doing with a lot of enterprise leaders. But there's something which is what Mason also kind of mentioned about is the governance and the evals, which kind of play a very important role in at least 2026 from my experience, is because we feel like one thing what we all have been going about and doing is, okay, we want to get into AI, and now we have agents that are doing stuff, but who's gonna actually and then there are agents talking to agents, but who's gonna have guardrails in place? And that's where the governance kind of comes into the game, the evals kind of come into the game, which agents are actually performing well, or the module game kind of comes into the game. So I feel like this is one of the very important pieces that will be the part of the game in 2026. And then one which is like which I think we all have been hearing for years is the data quality, which will play a very important role. And it's going to be it's like evergreen is what we kind of feel internally when we do a lot of research around the different trends, that data quality never expires. It is something which is top of the mind for every enterprise leader. And now with AI, we all know that better the data, better the results that we kind of see. So it's as good as garbage in, garbage out. Yeah, I think those are fantastic insights from you guys. One question that I had for Kunal and Mason as well, and this is just around the report, for anyone who's actually wanting to read the state of AI agents report. What should they expect? Any key takeaways? What can they keep in mind? How will this report actually help them get from point A to point B? Would you like to share a little bit about it? Because I know there's a huge team behind this report, and so much of data that has been pulled from 20,000 plus companies. So I'm kind of wanting to learn a little bit about that. So feel free to plug, and congratulations on this report, and tell us a little bit about this.
Mason, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I can start. I think, in a lot of regards, it's self-evident for the value of, like you've mentioned, the evaluation and the governance tool sets. I think the evaluation tools are really cool, personally. Just being able to define judges and determine, how does the safety of the response for one model compare to the other is, it's both a cool component, it's also an essential component. So I think it's a strong recommendation. And in fact, it's less of nice to have, it's more of we have to have it. And from another perspective, I think the report can serve as inspiration. If you have an organization that's thinking about, how do we apply generative AI, you can look at some of the common use cases, and you can look at some of the more industry focused ones and use those as directions. If I could provide advice to an organization that was thinking of starting a use case, I would say, start with something that is tedious and more easily automated. Something like maybe we have like a lot of internal documentation that we can improve search functionality for. Demonstrate value there. And then from there, move on to something that actually drives like new sources of income. So like a fully fledged like recommendation engine using personalized customer content.
Okay, this is very helpful. Kunal?
I think I would just say that one of the things that we have had seen with traditional data science and machine learning is that it has required a sort of very high technical acumen, and we may have people that are not in this space to get suddenly get extremely surprised by how do you get to learn it, how do you get to start it. I think the purpose of this report has been to sort of democratize AI for executives, for managers, for practitioners of technology and analytics who hear about the AI age that we are living in, and to sort of just make them aware as, hey, what are the people around you doing, what are some of the customers within your industries doing, and then more key is like, what are the basic ingredients of making this AI recipe or agentic recipe, and how do you get started. So that is our hope, is to sort of showcase all those capabilities to the world.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting for sure. In having that recipe, and for those enterprise leaders who are kind of wanting to get into the agents world or already into the agents world, they're always looking out for something like that. Talking about enterprise leaders, customers, I have a question for you, Chengyin. That is about because you speak to a lot of customers every week. Any parting words of wisdom on how do they elevate their AI strategy? Anything that you can share?
Yeah, and I think this is probably cliche, but I think involving end users early is very crucial. Because I see that a lot of the last mile problem that we experience in AI applications are usually not technology problems. They are usually people problems. Because human behaviors are non-uniform, and our preferences are all different. So how can we calibrate an AI application that actually cater to a wide range of preferences, and in some cases, in a more regulated context, regulatory rules. So I think making sure that end users are involved early on to make sure that we really carve those out is really important. And I think the last thing that I would say on this topic is that, again, we have to think about AI change as a cultural change. How do we plan this change organizationally? So that means that we not only think about AI application building as a short-term gain, like not just like how can we raise to this goalpost as fast as possible, but also in budget in time to think about how can we account for all this technical debt that we have built up along the way, just because we are trying to prove out our AI value so fast. Because usually, when something is applied, it's a band-aid at the beginning, you eventually have to rip it off and you have to start all over again. It'll be so much more painful if an organization doesn't plan for that.
I love it. I love the point where you mentioned AI should be considered as a cultural change. It shouldn't, because a lot of times that's what the enterprise, in a lot of enterprises, what we see is like, it feels like a lot that's kind of changing, but slowly and steadily, when you have the users early on in the game, like you said, it just becomes easier roadmap, and AI is implemented very easily. So thanks for sharing those insights. One last question, and I promise this is the last one for all three of you. If folks want to reach out to you, learn more about, obviously all the content that you share on different platforms, or if they want to connect and learn about, obviously agents, enterprises, governance, evals, use cases, Databricks, where can they do that? Mason, if they have to connect with you, learn about all these things, which is the best platform?
I'm always open on LinkedIn. Shoot me a message, reach out, happy to talk.
Awesome. Chengyin?
Yeah, same here as well. I will put in an additional shameless plug for our Databricks research blog. They always contain our latest research findings. So you also get to see what our team is working on these days as well.
Fantastic. I'm going to make sure to share that link with our audience as well. So for those who have joined, definitely I'll be sharing these links, the report link, the resources link, and obviously I'll be tagging or each of our guests as well, so y'all can even connect with them. Kunal, where can they connect? Or where can they, obviously learn about the different things that you do?
Yeah, I think Anvesan and Chenyan said +1 to LinkedIn. I'm there on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, so I'm always happy to chat. I'll make two shameless plugs on the
Yeah.
Databricks. One is we have a lot of good solution accelerators. So if you're like, hey, the best code is the one that you don't have to write, and you're like, hey, just download a project and import it in Databricks. And the second thing I would say, our learning and enablement team does an incredible job having monthly webinars that are free of cost that go over these different topics around governance, around apps. And so I think just for people who are interested to learn in this field or get started, learn there, attend those.
Okay, fantastic. Those are great insights, great resources. I'll make sure to obviously share these details with our audience as well. For those who are looking, who's wanting to, educate themselves in this space, this could be definitely super helpful. But I know this is almost the end of the show, but I really enjoyed hosting all three of you. Thanks for doing this, and we'll keep the conversation going. I can chat for another hour around enterprise AI and get into more detailing, but we'll keep that for part two, maybe later in the year. I'm excited for the Data and AI Summit that's going to also happen in June. I will be there in person, I can say, so I'm excited about that, and I'm definitely. Oh, see, Kunal has a background as well already.
Yeah.
Great. So I'm excited about it, and definitely looking forward to catching up with all of you on site there, and then also cover all the great announcements that you all always make. So thanks again for visiting the Robert Show, and thanks to our audience for joining us today.
Thank you for
Hey,
having us.
Thank you,
cheers with
everyone.
it.
Awesome. All right.